Hi friends. Tonight, you're waking up in a puddle of medieval misery as a longbowman in the king's army. If mud, mouldy bread, and mandatory archery practice in the rain sound like your kind of bedtime story, consider subscribing, but only if you genuinely enjoy it. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from and what time is it? Let's see how far this grim little tale reaches. Congratulations, you've just woken up in a medieval army encampment. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, you'll soon wish you weren't. Your eyes crack open to darkness, your body a geography of dull aches and sharp pains. What you're lying on isn't a mattress. It's a pile of half-rotted straw that's been collecting the bodily fluids of exhausted archers for months. There's something moving in it. Actually, several somethings. The lice don't pay rent, but they're taking their share of your blood anyway. Get up, you worthless sack of shit. That's not your alarm clock, that's Sergeant Blythe, whose morning routine involves kicking you in the ribs with a boot that's harder than week-old bread. You gasp awake fully now, your lungs filling with the aromatic symphony of unwashed men, wet wool, and the distinctive reek of last night's battlefield diarrhea from the guy sleeping 3 feet away. Privacy isn't a concept that exists here. Your bedroom is a patch of muddy ground shared with 20 other men who snore, fart, and occasionally cry in their sleep. Your bathroom is wherever you can squat without being seen. Your closet is the same damp, lice-infested wool tunic you've been wearing for weeks that now stands up on its own from accumulated sweat and grime. You stumble to your feet, your back screaming in protest. You're 22, but your spine feels 82. The morning air is so cold it hurts your teeth. The rain that leaked through the tent canvas overnight has formed a small pond where your boots were supposed to stay dry. Fantastic. Another day of squelching footsteps and toes that might actually fall off before dinner. Around you, men are moving like half-dead animals, coughing up whatever their lungs collected overnight. Some mutter prayers, others curse. The boy next to you, couldn't be more than 15, is shaking so hard you can hear his teeth chattering. Yesterday was his first battle. He still has blood behind his ears from where he tried to wash it off. As you grab your bow and quiver, Sergeant Blythe smacks the back of your head hard enough to make your vision blur. That's for breathing too loud, he growls, his breath a toxic cloud of stale ale and rotting teeth. Now move. The king doesn't pay you to dream about your mother's tits. And so begins your day as a medieval archer. You haven't even had breakfast yet, and already you're one wrong word away from a beating, one wrong step away from dysentery, and several hours away from pulling a bow that'll eventually deform your skeleton. And that's just the morning wake-up call. The real pain is just getting started. The morning drizzle isn't just water. It's nature's way of saying, "Good morning, I hate you." You stumble onto the training field, a churned-up mud pit that was once grass before hundreds of archers turned it into a slippery nightmare. The rain pelts your face like tiny cold needles, each drop a reminder that you chose this life. Or rather, it chose you when the king's recruiters came to your village and decided your arms looked useful enough to pull a bow. Speaking of bows, here's yours. It's not the cute little hunting bow your grandfather taught you to use. This is an English longbow, nearly as tall as you are, made from a single piece of yew that feels like it's personally trying to break your spirit. 6 feet of medieval torture device that requires more strength to draw than moving your neighbour's stubborn ox. "Draw! Hold! Loose!" barks the knight overseeing your training. Sir Edwin of somewhere important enough to make him better than you. He's missing an eye, which he'll tell anyone who listens was lost at Crécy. What he doesn't mention is that it was from a splinter when his bow snapped, not some heroic French lance. You plant your feet in the mud, notch an arrow, and pull. Every muscle from your fingers to your back screams in unified protest. The warbow requires at least 100 pounds of force to draw fully, the equivalent of lifting a grown man with just your fingers and arm muscles. The rain has made the bowstring slick. Your fingers already raw from yesterday's training. You feel a blister pop. Warm blood mixing with cold rain. "What are you doing, you worthless sack of sheep shit?" Sir Edwin is suddenly inches from your face, his one good eye bulging with theatrical rage. "That's not a full draw. My dead grandmother could pull better than that." You try again, straining until you feel something in your shoulder make a sound no body part should make. The arrow flies, missing the target by several feet and disappearing into the mud. The men around you snicker, not because it's funny, but because at least he's screaming at you instead of them. "Did your mother drop you on your head as a child?" Sir Edwin asks with deceptive quietness. "Or were you born this useless?" He turns to the other archers. "Look here, boys. This is what happens when cousins marry. Hour after hour you draw, loose, retrieve, repeat. No breaks, no rest. Your fingers are bleeding freely now, leaving crimson smears on each arrow. Blisters form, pop, and form again. Your back spasms in ways that promise future pain. The constant twisting motion has rubbed your tunic against your side until your skin is raw. A squire brings Sir Edwin warm mead. You get nothing but another round of insults when your arm shakes so badly you can barely hold the bow upright anymore. By the time the horn signals the end of morning training, you've shot more than 100 arrows. Your right hand can no longer close properly, your fingers frozen in a claw-like grip. Your shoulder feels dislocated. Your wet wool tunic has chafed your skin raw in at least 7 places. And the best part? This was just the morning session. After breakfast, if you can call it that, you get to do it all over again. The horn sounds for the meal break and you shuffle toward the cooking fires with the rest of the archers. Your stomach growls louder than the sergeant's insults, demanding food but simultaneously dreading what passes for it in this godforsaken camp. Welcome to medieval army catering, where the menu is simple, whatever won't immediately kill you. Today's special, anxiety with a side of dysentery. You take your place in the mud, no tables, no chairs, just your aching body lowered onto a damp log that's been polished smooth by the desperate backsides of 1,000 hungry archers before you. Your plate is a wooden trencher, basically a stale bread bowl that's been used so many times it's developed its own ecosystem. At least 3 generations of mould are competing for dominance in the corners. "Move it, you slow bastards," the cook barks, slapping a hunk of bread onto your trencher. The bread is dense enough to use as a weapon and speckled with suspicious green and white patches. Not spoiled enough to refuse, not fresh enough to enjoy, just like everything else in your life right now. Next comes a thin slice of salted pork fat. Not meat, just fat. The kind that sticks to the roof of your mouth and requires an act of God to swallow. But it's calories, and calories keep you alive long enough to catch an enemy arrow tomorrow. 20 yards away, under a weatherproof canvas, Sir Edwin and the other knights are dining on actual roasted meat. You can smell it from here, a torturous reminder of the rigid hierarchy that keeps your belly half empty and theirs full. One of them laughs loudly, probably at another joke about how pathetic you archers look hunched in the mud. The beverage service arrives, a boy with a bucket of weak ale slopping it into whatever container you provide. It's warm, flat, and tastes like someone washed their feet in it, but you drink it gratefully. Water from streams or wells could be carrying death in every sip. At least the brewing process killed most of what might kill you. "This bread's moving," mutters the archer next to you, a skeletal man named Watt with 3 teeth and a permanent squint. "Just extra protein," you reply, tearing off a chunk of your own questionable loaf. "Pretend it's seasoning." You chew mechanically, your jaw working overtime against the unyielding crust. Your gums bleed slightly where your back teeth are rotting. Every swallow is a negotiation between your throat and the stale mass that refuses to go down easily. A fly lands on your fat, and you don't even bother shooing it away. In the hierarchy of the camp, even the insects outrank you. The meal is over in minutes, no seconds, no dessert, no satisfaction. Just enough fuel to keep your bow arm working for another few hours. You've barely finished choking down the last bite when the horn blares again. Archers, form up! Something in your hand throbs painfully. Looking down, you notice a deep split in your palm that's oozing blood onto what remains of your bread. It wasn't there this morning, and now begins the worst part of any injury in medieval warfare. Figuring out how to fix it yourself. The throbbing in your palm has evolved from annoying to alarming. Each heartbeat sends a fresh wave of pain shooting up your arm. You stare at the wound, a deep split where your callus tore clean away during morning practice, now filled with mud, blood, and probably things too small to see but big enough to kill you. Welcome to medieval battlefield medicine, where physician is whoever has the steadiest hands and the strongest stomach. Today, that lucky person is you. You duck behind a supply tent, away from the sergeant's watchful eye. Time stolen is time punished, but a useless bow hand means you're worse than useless. You're a burden, and burdens get left behind. From your meagre possessions, you retrieve a small sewing kit. Not military issue. This was your mother's parting gift, tucked into your hands the day the recruiters came. The needle is iron, not particularly sharp, and the thread is coarse wool, designed for mending tunics, not flesh. Nearby, a veteran archer named Thomas is helping another man cauterize a gash with a knife heated in a small fire. The smell of burning flesh mixes with the ever-present stench of the camp. The wounded man has a leather strap between his teeth, his scream muffled to avoid drawing attention from officers who might decide he's too injured to be worth feeding anymore. "First time stitching yourself?" Thomas asks, noticing your hesitation. His face is a weathered map of scars and lines, one cheek permanently twisted from a poorly healed wound. You nod, embarrassed by your inexperience. "Clean it first," he advises, offering you a small flask. Spirits. Hurts like hellfire, but better than the rot. The liquid splashes into your wound, and for a moment the world goes white with pain. You bite down on your leather belt, tasting the years of sweat soaked into it, tears springing involuntarily to your eyes. "Now quick and deep," Thomas continues, returning to his own patient, "like stitching a tear in leather, and keep it dry if you can." He laughs without humour at this impossibility in the constant drizzle. Your first stitch is the worst. The needle doesn't want to pierce your skin, it slides off, requiring force that sends fresh blood welling up. When it finally punctures, the sensation is like being stabbed with a hot coal. The thread pulls through, rough and burning. Second stitch, third stitch, your vision swims with each one. Someone walks by, glances at your amateur surgery and keeps moving. Nothing unusual here, just another archer trying not to die from something that isn't even a proper battle wound. At the fourth stitch, you nearly pass out. The edges of the world go dark and you have to stop, breathing hard through your nose, swallowing the bile that rises in your throat. "Archer, where the hell are you hiding?" The sergeant's voice cuts through your pain-induced fog. No time to finish properly. You hastily tie off the thread, smearing blood across your palm. As you stumble back to formation, you glance at Thomas's patient. He's unconscious, the cauterized wound an angry red seam across his thigh, but he's breathing. "That'll get infected by tomorrow," whispers the archer next to you, eyeing your handiwork. "Better hope we march soon. Camp fever's worse than French arrows." Your hand throbs in agreement as you reach for your bow. The blood-stained string awaits, indifferent to your suffering, and you've still got 15 miles to march before sundown. Morning training, survived. Breakfast, consumed. Wound, patched. Your day is just getting started, and now comes the special torture known as the march. "Form up, you miserable excuses for archers," bellows the sergeant. 20 miles before sundown or you sleep without supper. 20 miles. On modern roads in comfortable shoes, that might be a challenging but doable hike. In medieval times, on what can generously be called paths in boots that were made for someone else's feet, it's a special circle of hell. Your gear weighs you down like a personal rain cloud of misery. The bow itself, nearly 6 feet of inflexible yew, must be protected from the rain at all costs, so you've wrapped it in oiled canvas that adds to its weight. Your quiver holds 24 arrows, each one hand-fletched and individually valuable enough that losing one means punishment. Add to that your meagre belongings, whatever food you've managed to save, a water skin that's never quite full enough, and the standard issue knife that's duller than the sergeant's wit. The wool tunic that seemed merely damp this morning has achieved a new state of wetness. It now feels like you're wearing a sheep that drowned in a river. Each step creates a unique symphony of squelching and chafing. The places where wool meets skin have become raw, burning zones of friction that no amount of adjustment seems to fix. Keep up, you lazy sons of whores. The sergeant rides alongside on a horse that looks as miserable as you feel. The difference is the horse isn't carrying anything but the sergeant. Your freshly stitched hand throbs with each swing of your arm. The thread pulls against swollen flesh, and you're certain you can feel something warm and wet spreading across your palm. Infection doesn't politely wait for convenient times to set in. The medieval immune system is engaged in a constant battle against an invisible enemy, and it's usually losing. 2 miles in, and the first man falls. Dysentery, most likely. The bloody flux that empties men from both ends until there's nothing left but a hollow shell. He's dragged to the side of the path, given a water skin if he's lucky, and left behind. Maybe a cart will pick him up, maybe wolves will. Neither the sergeant nor the marching formation slows. More men die shitting themselves than from enemy arrows, mutters the archer next to you, and the shit at least has the mercy to kill you quickly. 5 miles in, and your feet have moved beyond pain into something transcendent. The blisters have popped, releasing their fluid into boots that seem to be dissolving around your feet. Each step is a negotiation. How much weight to put where? Which part of your foot can bear another footfall without making you scream? The rain intensifies. What was a steady drizzle becomes a determined downpour. Water runs down your neck, pulls in the small of your back, soaks through every layer until there's no distinction between your sweat and the rain. 10 miles. Your shoulders feel dislocated from carrying your gear. Your vision narrows to the back of the man in front of you, one foot, then the other, through fields of mud that suck at your boots, up hills that seem designed specifically to break your spirit, past villages where people look at you not with admiration but with the wary eyes of those who know soldiers bring trouble. Faster! The sergeant's voice cuts through the rain like a knife. My dead grandmother moves quicker than you worthless maggots. Your world shrinks to pain, rhythm, and endurance. This is what being a medieval archer is really about, not the glory of battle, but the grinding, endless suffering between fights. And somewhere ahead, 20 miles away, more of the same awaits you, and you've still got the nights to deal with. You're soaked through like a rat fished from the Thames, barely standing after that 20-mile march from hell. Your feet a raw hamburger wrapped in sodden leather, and your hand pulses with each heartbeat, the crude stitches stretching against swollen flesh. And now, because misery always invites company, you're about to experience the medieval military's most rigid social hierarchy up close and personal. The knights have arrived at camp ahead of you. Of course they have. They rode horses while you trudged through mud like a peasant, which is exactly what you are to them. A walking arrow dispenser, a tactical necessity but a social inconvenience. Look what the rain dragged in, calls a voice dripping with aristocratic disdain. Sir Godfrey, a minor noble with major pretensions, sits beneath a canvas awning, his armour already tended to by a squire. His feet are propped on a wooden chest, and he's sipping something that steams in the cold air. The king's brave archers, ready to save the day with their little sticks. The other knights laugh, not because it's funny, but because Sir Godfrey outranks them, and medieval humour flows downhill like sewage. You keep your eyes down and try to move past them toward the archers' section of camp, a glorified mud pit with a few leaning tents. The contrast is stark and intentional. Their area has wooden platforms to keep bedrolls off the wet ground. Their tents are waterproofed with extra layers of canvas. They have chairs, actual chairs. You there, bowman, the voice stops you cold. Ignoring a knight is a punishable offence. My squire needs help with the horses. It's not a request. Despite having marched all day with your own gear, despite your injuries, despite being an archer and not a stable boy, you're being drafted for additional labour. Because in this world, a knight's convenience outranks your basic needs. Yes, my lord, you mutter, the words tasting like bile in your mouth. For the next hour you help the squire, a boy barely 14 who still ranks above you socially, unload, brush down, and feed horses that eat better than you do. Your stitched hand tears open during the work, but you dare not complain. The squire notices your bloody palm leaving smears on the saddle leather. You should wrap that, he says, his voice unexpectedly kind. Sir Godfrey will flog you if you stain his tack. He tears a strip from his own relatively clean undershirt and helps you bind the wound. This small kindness nearly brings tears to your eyes, not because it's so meaningful, but because your standards for human decency have fallen so catastrophically low. As you finally limp toward your tent, a sagging canvas nightmare that's already half flooded, you pass Sir Godfrey and his companions again. "Remember, Archer," he calls after you, "tomorrow you fight so we can win glory. Try not to embarrass us." You crawl into your soggy tent, every muscle screaming in protest. Your stomach growls. You missed the archer's evening meal while tending to the knight's horses. Through a tear in the canvas, you can see the knight's fire still burning bright, the smell of roasted meat drifting tauntingly across the camp. Just another reminder. In this world, some lives matter more than others, and yours, with your common blood and expendable skills, barely registers at all. But at least you can take comfort in one thought. When nature calls in the middle of this cold, wet night, it's going to be just as dangerous for everyone. Your bladder wakes you sometime in the dark hours before dawn. It's a familiar pressure that won't be ignored, especially after the weak ale that passed for dinner. In the modern world, this would mean a sleepy shuffle to the bathroom. In medieval military camp, it's a potentially life-threatening adventure. Welcome to the most dangerous toilet break of your life. You crawl from your sodden bedroll, every muscle screaming at the movement. The tent is somehow both freezing and humid, a special microclimate of misery. 3 other archers snore nearby, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Your hand throbs where the makeshift stitches have definitely torn open, and something warm trickles down your wrist. That can't be good. But nature's call won't wait for convenient times or healing wounds. Outside, the night is a blanket of oppressive darkness. No streetlights, no porch lights, no comforting glow of a smartphone. Just impenetrable blackness broken only by the distant flicker of guard fires at the camp's perimeter. The rain has finally stopped, but the world is still soaked, the ground a treacherous mix of mud and pooled water that sucks at your feet as you stagger toward the camp's edge. Medieval military latrines are simple affairs, trenches dug downwind of the camp partially covered with branches if you're lucky. Tonight, you're not feeling particularly social, so you veer away from the communal shit pit toward a copse of trees where you might find a moment's privacy. Privacy. The concept is almost laughable. Your entire life is lived in full view of others, your body rarely your own, your moments alone so rare they feel like stolen treasures. Even now you're painfully aware of the guards watching from their posts, of other nighttime wanderers seeking relief. You reach the edge of the camp, the darkness between the trees a mix of inviting and terrifying. Every rustle could be a breeze or a bandit. Every shadow could conceal a French scout with a knife. The border between safety and danger is thinner than the worn cloth of your tunic. Who goes there? A voice cuts through the darkness, sending your heart into your throat. Just an archer, you call back, your voice embarrassingly shaky. Nature's call, a gruff laugh from the sentry. Keep within sight of the fires, bowman. 3 men disappeared taking a piss last week. Found one with his throat cut and his breeches still down. With that comforting thought, you step just far enough into the trees to maintain a scrap of dignity. The act of unlacing your breeches with your injured hand is a small torture all its own. As you finally relieve yourself against a tree trunk, you're in your most vulnerable state. Literally caught with your pants down, one hand occupied, your bow and knife out of immediate reach. Every noise makes you flinch. Every breeze feels like someone's breath on your neck. The simple act of urination has never felt so dangerous, so exposed. This is medieval warfare, where even your most basic bodily functions come with the risk of a blade between your ribs. Business finished, you hastily secure your breeches and turn back toward camp, only to realize with a jolt of panic that the darkness has disoriented you. Which way were the fires? Which shadow was the path? For a terrifying moment, you're lost in a void just steps from safety. Then a horn blasts, shattering the night. Not an attack. Worse. It's the signal to rise for battle preparation. Dawn isn't even here, but your next ordeal is already beginning. So much for going back to sleep. It's time to find out what battle-ready means when you've barely slept. Your hand is bleeding, and your bladder is empty, but your stomach is still growling. The pre-battle hype awaits, and somehow it's even worse than having to pee in monster-infested darkness. Morning mist hangs over the camp like nature's own funeral shroud. It's not yet dawn, but the world is already stirring with a particular brand of anxiety that precedes organized killing. Welcome to the pre-battle ritual, where kings make speeches you can barely hear and your stomach performs gymnastics that would impress the most seasoned acrobat. The horn continues its mournful wail as you join the shuffle of bodies moving toward the assembly area. Men speak in hushed tones or don't speak at all. Some pray, lips moving silently as calloused fingers worry wooden rosary beads. Others stare blankly ahead, already somewhere else in their minds, back home perhaps, or forward to whatever awaits beyond death's door. Your mouth tastes like old leather and fear. Everyone claims to know the taste of fear, but until you've stood in the pre-dawn chill, knowing that by sunset you might be feeding crows, you don't truly understand its particular flavour, metallic and sharp, coating your tongue and refusing to be swallowed away. Archers form ranks by company ! The sergeant's voice cuts through the fog, somehow both thunderous and hoarse. Your company, the King's 17th Archers, though that grand title belies the sorry collection of men it represents, stumbles into something resembling order. In the distance, atop a hastily constructed platform, stands a figure in gleaming armour. The king, or perhaps a duke or earl important enough to wear similar finery, is preparing to deliver what passes for inspiration in medieval warfare. His actual words won't reach your ears. You're too far back, just one anonymous bow among hundreds. But the cheers roll backward through the ranks like waves, and you join them when appropriate, your voice adding to the hollow thunder. "We're fighting for God and England today, lads," says Thomas, the veteran who helped you stitch your hand. He says this before every battle, as if reminding himself as much as informing you. That, and 3 pennies a day, if the paymaster lives through it. Your company is directed toward the left flank. Each archer is handed a sharpened wooden stake nearly as tall as a man. These are your first line of defense against cavalry. You'll plant them in the ground at an angle, creating a deadly fence of points that can impale charging horses. It's brutal but effective, transforming archers from vulnerable targets into a thorny problem for mounted knights. You drive your stake into the soft earth, angling it outward toward the still empty battlefield. Your hands shake, the right one leaving smears of blood on the wood. The makeshift bandage from the squire is now a sodden crimson rag that does little to hide the severity of your wound. You've seen men lose hands to infection from less. Around you, archers prepare with grim efficiency. Some check bowstrings, protecting them from the morning dew beneath leather covers. Others count arrows, arranging them for quick retrieval. Veterans empty their bladders and bowels one last time. Experience has taught them that fear will loosen everything once the fighting starts. You mutter a half-forgotten prayer your mother taught you, not because you're particularly devout, but because in this moment, any port in the storm of your terror seems worth reaching for. Your bladder is already halfway empty from fear, a warm trickle down your leg that you pretend not to notice. On the horizon, the first hint of enemy colours appears, tiny specks of movement that will soon become men trying to kill you. Men not so different from yourself, following orders, fighting someone else's war. The sergeant walks the line, his face a mask of forced confidence. Remember your training. Draw. Loose. Kill the French bastards before they kill you. Simple instructions for the complex act of ending human lives, as if that's all there is to it. The horn sounds again. 3 long, mournful notes. Battle stations. No turning back now. Time to pretend you're brave. The silence before battle isn't actually silent. It's filled with the small sounds of terror, ragged breathing, the creak of leather, nervous coughs that men try to stifle, and the distinctive ping of bladders and bowels emptying themselves without permission. The enemy appears through the morning mist like apparitions, their banners hanging limp in the still air. Then everything happens at once. Stop! The command rattles down the line. Your fingers, stiff with cold and fear, fumble an arrow from your quiver. The wound on your hand screams as you place the arrow against the bowstring. Fresh blood makes everything slippery. Not ideal when precision means survival. Draw. You pull back with strength born of terror rather than training. The longbow resists, its 100-pound draw weight fighting against your trembling muscles. The string cuts into the existing wound on your fingers, opening fresh channels of pain. Your shoulder joints creak, audibly protesting the unnatural position. Loose! The arrow leaps from your bow with a satisfying thrum that vibrates through your whole body. 2,000 archers releasing at once creates a sound unlike anything in the modern world. Part giant sigh, part death's whisper. The sky darkens with arrows, a lethal rain arcing toward the advancing enemy line. You don't wait to see where your arrow lands. You're already reaching for another, fingers moving with the mechanical repetition drilled into you through countless hours of training. Knock, draw, loose. Knock, draw, loose. No time to think, no time to feel, just the rhythm of dealing death from a distance. The French respond with their own archers, mostly Genoese crossbowmen. Their bolts take longer to load but fly with vicious intent. One lands inches from your foot, burying itself in the mud with a wet thunk. Another takes the archer to your left through the throat. He drops without a sound, eyes wide with surprised indignation, as if death had broken some unspoken agreement. You knew him. Not well, but enough to share a fire last night. He taught you a drinking song about a milkmaid and a priest that you'll never hear the end of now. Keep shooting. Your quiver empties alarmingly fast. 24 arrows can be loosed in under 2 minutes by a skilled archer. You're down to your last 5 when the French cavalry begins their charge, their horses' hooves throwing up clods of earth, armour glinting dully in the morning light. This is the moment the stakes are for, the wooden spikes you planted earlier. The horses see them too late, impaling themselves with sickening screams that sound disturbingly human. Knights tumble from saddles, their expensive armour becoming metal coffins as they hit the ground awkwardly. Your final arrow finds a gap in someone's armour. You'll never know whose. A man falls and you've killed him without seeing his face. This is the archer's burden, to deal death wholesale, to never witness the eyes as they dim. Swords! The command comes as your quiver empties completely. The long-range portion of this day's killing is over. Now comes the part they never romanticize in the songs, when archers become just another body with a blade. Your fingers bleed freely now, the bowstring having stripped them raw. Red droplets pattern the churned earth at your feet, adding to the growing slick of blood, mud, and the other fluids that mark a battlefield. Behind you, a reinforcement archer hands out fresh arrows collected from the dead, both enemies and allies. Waste not, want not. The medieval recycling program is brutally efficient. You take them without question. The battle is far from over, and there are still men to kill before you can think about being human again. The arrows are gone. The distance that kept you safely removed from the intimate horror of killing has vanished. Now comes the part of battle that no one prepares you for, when an archer becomes just another body in the churning chaos of medieval combat. Welcome to melee, where death isn't delivered from 200 paces but is breathed directly into your face. You drop your precious bow, not discarding it, but slinging it across your back with practiced movements. The weapon that defines you is useless now. Instead, you draw the short sword that's been hanging at your hip like an afterthought. It's barely longer than a large knife, its edge notched and dull from previous battles and poor maintenance. Your buckler, a small round shield cobbled together from scraps of wood and a thin layer of metal, feels absurdly inadequate against the weapons rushing toward you. The French infantry has broken through the line of stakes. They're close enough now that you can see their faces, their beards, the particular patterns of mud on their armour. Close enough to smell the garlic on their breath, the sweat of their fear that mirrors your own. "Hold the line," someone screams, though the line is already fracturing into individual pockets of desperate combat. Your first opponent appears through the fog of war, a French foot soldier with a polearm that outreaches your sword by several feet. He lunges, the point of his weapon seeking your soft parts with mindless determination. You twist, the movement clumsy but effective. The blade slides past, tearing a line through your tunic rather than your flesh. There's no time to think, no space to consider the complex moral implications of killing another human being. Your body moves with primitive intelligence, the survival instinct overriding everything else. You lunge forward, ducking under his weapon's arc, and drive your short sword into the gap between his chest plate and thigh armour. You feel the blade sink into flesh, meeting resistance then giving way. The sensation travels up your arm like a sickening message. The man makes a sound, not a dramatic death cry from the poems, but a surprised exhale, as if someone had simply pushed him unexpectedly. He looks at you with genuine confusion before slumping forward. You yank your blade free, the movement sending fresh pain radiating from your injured hand. You turn just in time to see a French knight bearing down on you, his horse having somehow navigated the stakes. His sword is raised, sunlight catching the edge in a momentary flash of beauty before it descends toward your skull. A blur of movement to your left. Thomas, the veteran archer, swings a wooden mallet. Where did he get that? That connects with the knight's knee with a sound like a branch breaking. The knight topples, his expensive armor becoming a prison as he hits the ground. Thomas brings the mallet down on the knight's helmet once, twice, the metal denting inward until it's no longer a helmet but a misshapen tomb. "Always aim for the joints," Thomas pants, his face speckled with blood that isn't his. "Their armor's shit there." You nod, this grotesque wisdom now part of your education. There's blood in your eyes, yours or someone else's, impossible to tell. The battlefield has contracted to just the few feet around you, everything beyond a blur of motion and carnage. Your world is immediate, visceral, reduced to the most primitive equation. Kill or be killed. You're not an archer anymore. You're not a soldier or a warrior or any of the romanticized words poets might use later. You're just an animal fighting to see the next sunrise, using whatever weapons are at hand against others doing exactly the same. And somehow, that makes the horror of it all both better and infinitely worse. The horns blare victory, but victory feels nothing like the songs promised. The battlefield around you has transformed into a grotesque tableau, the afternoon sun illuminating what should never be seen in proper light. This is the part the minstrels conveniently skip in their heroic ballads, the afterlife of battle, where glory dissolves into gruesome housekeeping. Welcome to post-battle cleanup, the unsung task of the survivors. The field stretches before you, a tapestry of broken bodies and discarded dreams. Men lie in impossible positions, their limbs bent at angles nature never intended. The mud beneath your feet isn't brown anymore. It's a sickening red-black cocktail that squelches with each step, releasing the metallic scent of spilled life. You're standing in a medieval slaughterhouse, only these weren't animals. These were sons, fathers, brothers, men who, just hours ago, were as afraid as you. "Start collecting arrows," orders the sergeant, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "Any that aren't broken. Check ours first, then theirs." And so begins the grim treasure hunt. You move among the dead, pulling arrows from bodies with wet, sucking sounds that will echo in your nightmares for years to come. Some come free easily. Others require a foot braced against cold flesh for leverage. Your quiver fills slowly with these recycled instruments of death, each one a small economic victory. Arrows are expensive, men are not. Nearby, Thomas kneels beside a French knight, methodically stripping him of anything valuable. The dead man's eyes stare skyward, already becoming cloudy, but his boots, his glorious waterproof leather boots, are exactly what Thomas needs. The veteran archer works the right boot free with practiced efficiency. "His feet are smaller than mine," Thomas mutters, disappointment evident in his voice. He tosses the boot aside and moves to the next body. The medieval second-hand market is brutally practical. You stumble upon a fallen English archer, his face frozen in permanent surprise. You recognize him, shared a fire with him just last night. Can't remember his name, but you remember his laugh. The shame of this memory lapse hits harder than it should. He deserves to be remembered properly, not as that archer with the gap-toothed smile. Protocol demands you collect his usable equipment for redistribution. His bow is intact, his arrows mostly unbroken, his water skin still half full. You take them all, murmuring an apology to a man who can no longer hear you. This isn't theft, it's military efficiency. Everything cycles through, from arrows to armor, until it's too broken to serve. Not everyone on the field is dead. The wounded create a soundtrack of moans and pleas that's somehow worse than screaming would be. English soldiers move among them, offering mercy to those beyond help. A quick knife across the throat, more kindness than cruelty. The French wounded are largely ignored unless they look valuable enough to ransom. Medieval healthcare is brutally selective. Your hand throbs violently, the makeshift bandage now a sodden mass of congealed blood and dirt. Infection is a certainty, not a possibility. But at least you're standing. At least your entrails aren't decorating the ground. At least you get to worry about tomorrow's problems. The sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the carnage. In an hour you'll be expected to help dig graves for the English dead. The French will feed the crows or be burned in mass pyres, depending on how quickly the commanders want to move camp. This is your reward for survival. More work, more horror, and the distinct privilege of doing it all again tomorrow if required. The life of a medieval archer doesn't culminate in glory. It culminates in bloody hands and borrowed boots, collecting arrows from the dead so you can shoot them again another day. Night falls on the battlefield like a funeral shroud. The day's carnage slowly disappears into merciful darkness, though the sounds and smells remain. Persistent reminders that hell isn't some distant theological concept, but a place men create for each other right here on muddy earth. You've survived your first day as a medieval archer, though survived feels like too triumphant a word for your current state. Welcome to the aftermath, where victory tastes like copper and ashes. You sit by a meagre fire, one of dozens dotting the conquered field like earthbound stars. Your company has been reduced by nearly a third, some dead, some wounded beyond usefulness, some simply vanished in the chaos. The survivors huddle together, not for warmth or camaraderie, but because the alternative is to be alone with the day's memories. No one speaks much. What is there to say that wouldn't sound hollow or mad? Dinner is a thin stew ladled from a communal pot. Turnips, barley, and what might charitably be called meat floating in brackish water. You can't taste it. Your mouth still carries the metallic tang of fear and exertion. You eat mechanically, each spoonful a duty rather than a pleasure. Your body needs fuel for tomorrow's horrors. The knights and commanders feast 100 yards away in captured tents. Their celebration drifts across the camp. Raucous laughter, the clinking of wine cups, boasts growing taller with each retelling. They won a battle today. You just didn't die in one. The distinction is important in medieval warfare. Your hand throbs with renewed urgency now that the battle's mindless activity has ended. The bandage needs changing, but clean cloth is as rare as kindness here. You peel back the filthy wrapping to reveal what can only be described as impending disaster. The wound edges gape, oozing a mixture of blood and something yellowish. Red streaks extend from the gash toward your wrist. Blood poisoning, the silent killer that claims more soldiers than swords ever do. Thomas notices your examination, his face grim in the flickering firelight. Need to get that cleaned proper, he says, offering you a leather flask. Not for drinking, he adds when you reach for it. Pour it in. Burns worse than the devil's piss, but it might save the hand. The liquid, some unholy distillation that smells like it could strip paint, sears your open flesh with such intensity that for a moment the world goes completely white. You bite down on a stick someone shoves between your teeth, tasting dirt and old blood. Men around the fire watch with detached interest. Your agony is tonight's brief entertainment before their own pains reclaim their attention. Now wrap it tight, Thomas instructs, tearing a relatively clean strip from his undershirt, and pray to whatever god you fancy. Prayer seems both necessary and futile. What god watches over battlefields with any benevolence? What divine plan requires this meat grinder of human misery? Still, you mutter the words your mother taught you, if only because they connect you to a time before you knew what a man's insides looked like, spilled across muddy ground. A sergeant wanders through camp, counting survivors and assessing damages. His face betrays nothing when he reaches your fire. You lot are with the king's company tomorrow, he announces flatly. Front position, dawn start. No rest for the living. The dead are the only ones excused from tomorrow's duties. You shiver uncontrollably now, though whether from cold, shock, or the infection crawling up your arm, it's impossible to tell. Your borrowed cloak, taken from a dead archer whose face you try not to remember, is damp and smells of someone else's sweat. Your boots fell apart during the march, their soles now held together with strips of leather hastily cut from a fallen enemy's belt. Medieval recycling at its most pragmatic. Across the fire, a young archer, barely old enough to draw a warbow, stares into the flames with vacant eyes. His hands haven't stopped shaking since the fighting ended, his first battle, maybe his last, given how poorly he's holding himself together. The veterans ignore him. Breaking down earns no sympathy here, just a collective turning away, as if weakness might be contagious. You should sleep. Tomorrow will demand every scrap of strength you have left. But closing your eyes means seeing it all again. The French knight's face as Thomas caved in his helmet, the sound of arrows hitting flesh, the surprised expression of the man you stabbed as if death was the last thing he expected today. So instead, you stare at the fire and take inventory of your survival. One functioning hand, a collection of bruises, muscles that scream with every movement, a hollowness in your chest where something important used to be. You've lost something today that you'll never recover, some essential innocence that no amount of victory can restore. The knight who mocked you yesterday rides by your fire, now draped in captured finery. He's drinking directly from a wineskin, his face flushed with victory and alcohol. The king himself apparently toasted his bravery in single combat, a moment of battlefield theatre carefully staged far from the arrow storm. Tomorrow, minstrels will already be composing songs about his heroism, while your role, and the role of every archer who made his charge possible, will be reduced to a footnote, if mentioned at all. This is the final insult of the medieval military hierarchy. Those who bleed most receive the least glory. You look around at your fellow archers, dirty, exhausted, wounded, but still breathing. There's a grim satisfaction in that. Not pride exactly, but the raw animal relief of continued existence. You've survived one day as a medieval archer. The odds say you won't survive many more. The infection in your hand will likely worsen. The next battle might bring an arrow with your name on it. Camp fever, dysentery, or a dozen other medieval ailments wait patiently for your weakened body. But tonight, you're still here, still breathing, still part of the living rather than the collection of cooling meat that litters the battlefield. As you finally drift toward uneasy sleep, one thought circles through your mind. In the Middle Ages there are no happy endings, only temporary reprieves. No one rides off into the sunset. They just survive until darkness falls, then pray for the strength to face another dawn. And remarkably, despite everything, some small part of you hopes you'll be among them. So ends our journey through a day in the life of a medieval archer, a brutal reminder of why you wouldn't last 24 hours in their boots. We've traded the romanticized vision of heroic archers from Robin Hood tales for the grim reality, a world of physical suffering, rigid social hierarchies, primitive medicine, and psychological trauma. The medieval battlefield wasn't a place of glory for common soldiers. It was a meat grinder that consumed bodies and souls with equal indifference. Archers didn't win accolades or write memoirs or retire to comfortable estates. They died young, broken, and largely anonymous, their contributions minimized by the same nobility that depended on their lethal skills. Modern warfare is horrific in its own ways, but at least today's soldiers have antibiotics, pain relief, and some recognition of the psychological impact of combat. The medieval archer had none of these comforts, just the cold certainty that their body was a disposable resource in someone else's power game. So the next time you romanticize the Middle Ages or fantasize about the simpler life of medieval times, remember this day. The bleeding hands, the infected wounds, the casual cruelty, the arbitrary hierarchy, and the soul-crushing weight of witnessing industrialized death centuries before, humans developed any therapeutic framework for processing such trauma. The medieval archer's life wasn't heroic. It was a brutal exercise in endurance that most modern humans, accustomed to comfort and dignity, would fail within hours. Their resilience wasn't inspirational, it was desperate, the grim determination of those with no better options. Perhaps instead of envying the past, we should be grateful to live in an age where most of us will never know what it feels like to pull arrows from the dead, stitch our own wounds without anesthesia, or fall asleep wondering if blood poisoning will claim us before the enemy gets another chance. And perhaps we should spare a thought for those forgotten archers, the unsung, unwashed masses whose countless anonymous sacrifices paved the long, bloody road to our more comfortable present. Hello, my friends. Tonight we're stepping into the brutal world of ancient Sparta, a place where weakness wasn't just frowned upon, it was eliminated. Get ready to find out why surviving as a Spartan was a lot harder than the movies make it look. It's the year 480 BC. The Persian Empire is huge and scary. Greece is just a bunch of small city-states trying not to get crushed. And right in the middle of all this is Sparta, probably the most feared society in the ancient world. You've just been born into this warrior society. Great news, right? Well, not so fast. Most babies get a cute little hat and some cuddly toys when they're born. Spartan babies? They get inspected like they're fruit at the market. And trust me, the Spartans were very picky shoppers. Within days of your birth, the village elders gather around to check you out. They're not there to coo over how cute you are. They're there to decide if you get to live. Yes, you heard that right. In Sparta, your first challenge wasn't learning to walk or talk. It was proving you deserved to breathe their air. These old men, who've survived countless battles and seen enough blood to fill an ocean, look you over with cold eyes. They're checking for any sign of weakness or defect. Too small? Problem. Oddly shaped limb? Problem. Don't cry loud enough? Believe it or not, also a problem. Spartans wanted their babies to have strong lungs and a fighting spirit from day one. If these elders decide you don't meet their standards for strength and perfection, they don't send you to some special care facility. They don't even bother with a polite rejection letter. Instead, you're taken to a place called Apothetae near Mount Taygetus, which is basically a fancy way of saying a cold, rocky slope where unwanted babies are left to die. That's right. If you fail your first test in Sparta, you become wolf food, and you don't even get to write a complaint about poor customer service. Imagine that. In our world, 2-day-old babies struggle to keep their eyes open. In Sparta, they're already fighting for their lives. Talk about starting your education early. So let's say you pass this first brutal test. The elders nod in approval. You get to live, but don't get too comfortable. This wasn't some one-time assessment. The Spartans didn't just want strong babies, they wanted tough ones too. Your mother isn't allowed to coddle you. No warm, comfy blankets. No gentle rocking when you cry. Spartan babies were bathed in wine, not warm water. They believed this would somehow test your strength and harden your little baby body. It's like they were marinating you for a life of toughness. Crying too much? Too bad. Nobody's rushing to comfort you. Spartans believed that responding to a baby's cries made them weak. So while babies in Athens and other Greek cities were being sung lullabies, Spartan babies were basically being told to suck it up. Your crib? Not soft and cozy. Spartan babies slept on hard surfaces because comfort was considered the enemy of strength. Sure, modern science tells us babies need comfort and security to develop properly, but Sparta wasn't big on child psychology research. As a toddler, things don't get much better. While kids in other societies were playing with toys and learning nursery rhymes, Spartan toddlers were already being conditioned for a life of hardship. Play wasn't just play, it was preparation for war. By the age of 5, you're expected to sit through adult meals without complaining, And these weren't happy family dinners with everyone sharing stories about their day. These were serious affairs where children were seen but rarely heard, unless they had something clever to say. And here's a fun fact. Spartan mothers would hand their sons a shield before battle and tell them to come back with it or on it. This meant either come back victorious, still holding your shield, or come back dead carried on your shield. Coming back without your shield meant you dropped it to run away, and that was the biggest shame possible. So, congrats. You've survived your first few years in Sparta. You weren't left on a mountain to die. You didn't succumb to the harsh bathing practices. You learned to endure discomfort without crying. You managed to not annoy any adults enough for them to reconsider that whole mountain-leaving thing. But don't celebrate just yet. Remember, we're still just getting started. In Sparta, making it through infancy wasn't considered an accomplishment. It was the bare minimum. The real challenges haven't even begun. As you approach your 7th birthday, you might start noticing your parents acting strange. Maybe your mum hugs you a little longer. Maybe your dad actually cracks a smile when you show him how well you can throw a rock. They know what's coming, and deep down, so do you. Because in Sparta, turning 7 wasn't marked with a fun party and gifts. It was marked by the end of whatever childhood you had. On your 7th birthday, you wouldn't be blowing out candles on a cake. You'd be saying goodbye to your family. But we'll get to that lovely chapter of Spartan life later. For now, just remember, you somehow made it through the first 7 years of Spartan life. That's quite an achievement, considering your life was nearly ended when you were still wearing your newborn onesie. So sleep tight, my friends. At least you weren't born in ancient Sparta, where making it through the first week of life was already beating the odds. And the next time you think your parents were strict, just remember, at least they didn't have you inspected for defects and leave you on a mountain if you didn't pass the test. Now, if you've survived this far in our story, you're already doing better than many Spartan babies, but the true challenge is yet to come. In our next chapter, we'll dive into the infamous Agog, the Spartan education system that makes modern boot camp look like a luxury spa retreat. Until then, appreciate your soft bed and the fact that nobody bathed you in wine as an infant. Sweet dreams. So you managed to survive birth inspection and your first 7 years in Sparta. Congrats. Most modern parents would throw a party when their kid turns 7. You get a special Spartan celebration too, being ripped away from your family and thrown into what might be history's most brutal boarding school. Welcome to the Agog, where childhood dreams go to die and warriors are born. Think your school was tough? At least your teachers didn't beat you for crying. Actually, let me rephrase that. At least your teachers didn't beat you until you stopped crying, and then beat you some more just to make sure the lesson stuck. Your 7th birthday marks the end of whatever childhood you had. One day, you're sleeping under your family's roof. The next, you're being marched off to join the other boys your age in the barracks. Hope you weren't too attached to your parents, because family time just got reduced to brief, occasional visits. Your new family. A bunch of other terrified 7-year-olds and some older boys who see you as their personal punching bag. The Agog wasn't divided into neat little grades like modern schools. Instead, you were grouped by age. The little boys from 7 to 12, the youths from 12 to 18, and the young men from 18 to 20. And each group had the delightful job of making life miserable for the group below them. It was basically a pyramid scheme of pain. Your new home is a barracks, not exactly a 5-star hotel. The beds are hard, if you're lucky enough to get one. More likely, you're sleeping on a mat made of reeds that you gathered yourself from the Eurotas River. And those reeds, you're not allowed to use a knife to cut them. You have to tear them with your bare hands. Because in Sparta, even making your own bed has to be a test of strength. The Agog wasn't big on academic subjects. No algebra or essay writing here. Your curriculum was simple. Pain, more pain, and occasionally some useful skills that would help you inflict pain on others. You did learn some reading and writing, just enough to understand military orders and maybe read some inspiring war poems. Math, just enough to count your enemies and divide the spoils of war. Science, please. The only chemistry Spartans cared about was how quickly blood dried on bronze. Instead of books, your school supplies were your fists and whatever you could steal. Speaking of stealing, in Sparta, theft wasn't just allowed for young boys, it was encouraged. But here's the catch. If you got caught, you weren't punished for stealing, you were punished for getting caught. The lesson wasn't don't steal, it was don't be bad at stealing. There's a famous story about a Spartan boy who stole a fox and hid it under his cloak. When he was questioned by a supervisor, he denied everything. Meanwhile, the fox was literally eating through his stomach. The boy stood there, face straight, not making a sound until he collapsed and died rather than admit his theft. In most places, this would be a tragedy. In Sparta, it was an inspirational tale they told to children. Sweet dreams, kids! Food in the agog made modern school lunches look like gourmet meals. Your main dish was black broth, a lovely soup made of boiled pig's blood, salt and vinegar. Ancient writers from other Greek cities said it was so disgusting, they understood why Spartans were ready to die in battle. When you're eating pig's blood soup every day, charging into enemy spears starts looking like a viable alternative. The portions were deliberately small, just enough to keep you alive but constantly hungry. The idea was to teach you to deal with hunger and, of course, encourage you to steal more food. Remember, getting caught stealing meant a beating, so you either went hungry or got really good at theft. It's like a really twisted version of home economics class. Physical training was the main focus of your day. Running, wrestling, fighting with weapons, all done barefoot, wearing just a thin tunic summer or winter. In summer, you baked under the Greek sun. In winter, you froze. Complaining about either meant, you guessed it, more beatings. And speaking of beatings, let's talk about the annual festival of Artemis Orthia, where boys were whipped at an altar until they bled, sometimes to death. This wasn't punishment for anything specific. It was just a regular religious festival. The boy who endured the longest without crying or begging for mercy won honour. Not a trophy, not a day off, just honour. And adults would gather around to watch this, cheering as if it were a sporting event. Because nothing says healthy society like adults getting entertainment from watching children being whipped. Hygiene wasn't high on the Spartan priority list. You got one bath a year. The rest of the time, you washed in the cold waters of the Eurotas River. Soap? That's for weaklings. Deodorant? Not invented yet, and if it had been, Spartans would have banned it anyway. The smell of unwashed teenage boys was probably a weapon in itself. Your clothing consisted of one thin cloak, which had to last you an entire year. No extras, no changes of clothes. If it tore, you fixed it. If you outgrew it, too bad. In winter, the older boys would sometimes take pity on the younger ones and let them huddle close for warmth. This wasn't kindness, it was just making sure the next generation of warriors didn't freeze to death before they could be useful in battle. Privacy? That wasn't a word Spartans understood. You ate together, trained together, slept together, and suffered together. Every moment of your day was observed and judged by someone older and meaner than you. Your every weakness was noted and punished. Your achievements were acknowledged with a nod at best, because excellence wasn't praised, it was expected. One of the most important lessons you learned in the Agog was to endure pain without showing it. Crying was for babies and Athenians, which to Spartans were basically the same thing. If you were injured during training or punished for some offence, you were expected to bear it silently, with your face showing no emotion. The only acceptable facial expression in Sparta was stoic determination, with occasional variations of murderous rage saved for battle. By the time you were 12, you'd learn to survive on minimal food, endure extreme temperatures, fight with your fists and basic weapons, steal without getting caught, and take a beating without crying. In modern terms, you'd have an impressive set of criminal skills and severe emotional trauma. In Spartan terms, you were just getting started. The teenage years in the Agog made the earlier years look like a gentle warm-up. Your training intensified. The older boys became even more creative in finding ways to test and torment you. The supervisors expected more and punished failure more harshly. Your body was constantly covered in bruises, cuts, and scars. Each one a lesson, or so the Spartans claimed. Friendship existed in Sparta, but not the kind where you share secrets and braid each other's hair. Spartan friendship was forged in shared suffering and mutual protection. You learned to fight not just for yourself, but for your comrades. Because in battle, the guy next to you was the one keeping you alive. You didn't have to like him, but you had to be willing to die for him, and he for you. There's a reason Sparta produced the fiercest warriors in Greece. By the time a boy emerged from the agoge at age 20, he had endured more pain, hunger, and hardship than most people faced in a lifetime. He had been beaten, frozen, starved, and humiliated, and had survived it all. He wasn't just trained to fight, he was trained to see death as preferable to defeat or dishonor. So there you have it, Spartan education in all its brutal glory. While kids in Athens were learning philosophy and art, Spartan kids were learning how to take a punch and sleep through winter with just a thin cloak. While other Greek children were playing with toys, Spartan children were playing games where the loser got beaten. Modern parents worry about their kids' screen time and whether they're eating enough vegetables. Spartan parents worried about whether their sons would survive another day of education and whether they were tough enough to someday stand in the shield wall against Sparta's enemies. The most amazing thing about the agoge wasn't that it created fierce warriors, it's that any child survived it at all. And yet generation after generation of Spartan boys endured this system, growing up to become the soldiers that all of Greece feared. If you're thinking you could have made it through this brutal childhood, you're either fooling yourself or you're the toughest person alive. So the next time you think your school days were rough, remember the agoge, where the homework was stealing food without getting caught, detention meant being whipped until you bled, and graduation only meant you now got to face actual battles, where enemies were actively trying to kill you. And if you thought the agoge was bad, wait until you see what adult life was like for a Spartan warrior. But that's a story for later. For now, just be thankful you weren't born in ancient Sparta, where your childhood ended at 7, and adulthood was something you were lucky to reach at all. So you've somehow survived the agoge. Your body is covered in scars, your mind is hardwired for violence, and you've mastered the art of stealing food without getting caught. Congratulations, you've reached the ripe old age of 20 in Sparta. In most ancient societies, this would mean you're now a free adult, ready to start your own life. In Sparta, it means you get to graduate from practice warrior to actual warrior. The good news is you're finally a full citizen. The bad news is you're still not free. Welcome to adulthood, Spartan style, where you're essentially state property with a pulse. While young men in Athens were studying philosophy, debating in the assembly, or learning a trade, you get to devote your entire existence to being a weapon. Not wielding a weapon, being one. At 20, you join the ranks of the homoioi, or equals, full Spartan citizens who form the backbone of the military. The term equals is a bit misleading though. Sure, all Spartan warriors are equal in their devotion to the state and their readiness to die in battle, but there's still a strict hierarchy, and you're starting at the bottom. Your first order of business as a fresh adult is to apply for membership in a syssitia, a mess group or dining club. And this isn't like picking which table to sit at in the cafeteria. Your application has to be unanimously approved by all current members. Just one no vote and you're rejected. And rejection doesn't mean you find another group. It means you lose your citizenship rights. No pressure. These syssitia are where you'll take all your meals for the rest of your life. Yes, you read that right. Even after becoming an adult, you still don't get to eat at home. The state wants to make sure you're bonding with your fellow soldiers 24/7. Nothing says team building like never escaping your co-workers, even at dinner time. Speaking of dinner, you're expected to contribute to the mess. Every member must donate a monthly quota of barley, wine, cheese, figs, and a little money to buy meat. Can't afford your share? Too bad. You're demoted from the citizenship ranks. The Spartans weren't big on social safety nets. The food itself hasn't improved much since your Agog days. Your main course is still that delicious black broth. Yes, the pig's blood soup that made other Greeks gag. At least now you get slightly larger portions. Just enough to maintain your fighting weight, but never enough to feel comfortable. Because comfort, as you've learned by now, is the enemy of excellence in Sparta. Now let's talk about your living arrangements. While men in other Greek cities lived with their wives and children, you get to keep bunking with the boys. Yes, even after marriage, Spartan men continued to live in the barracks until age 30. Your visits home to your wife were brief, secret, and infrequent. Nothing says honeymoon phase like sneaking out of the barracks at night and having to be back before anyone notices you're gone. Marriage itself was a strange affair in Sparta. Some sources say that bride and groom didn't even see each other before the wedding. On the wedding night, the bride's hair was cut short, she was dressed in men's clothes, and left alone in a dark room. The groom would sneak in, do the deed, and sneak back to the barracks before dawn. Romance Spartan style. The purpose of marriage wasn't love or companionship. It was making more Spartans. If you and your wife didn't produce children after a reasonable time, the state might reassign one or both of you to more fertile partners. Your body belongs to Sparta, and so do any children you produce. Speaking of which, if you thought your childhood was harsh, wait until you see how your kids are raised. You get to watch your sons go through the same brutal training you endured, and you're expected to approve. Show too much concern for your child's safety or comfort, and you're seen as weak and unpatriotic. Father of the Year in Sparta means being okay with your 7-year-old being beaten for educational purposes. Your daily life as a young Spartan warrior revolves around one thing: preparation for war. Your training continues, but now it's even more intense and specific. Hours upon hours of drilling with the spear and shield, marching in formation until your unit moves as one body, practicing the shield wall technique that made Spartan phalanxes nearly impenetrable. Physical fitness remains paramount. Daily exercises keep your body in peak fighting condition. Strength, speed, endurance, all constantly tested and improved. Skip a training session? Unthinkable. The punishment would be severe, but more importantly, the shame would be unbearable. In a society where your worth is measured by your military value, being physically fit isn't vanity, it's your civic duty. The famous red cloak and bronze shield are now yours to bear, but they're not just fashion statements or protective gear. They're symbols of what you are: a Spartan warrior, a living weapon dedicated to the state. The shield, in particular, carries special significance. As your mother probably told you before your first battle, come back with your shield or on it. Return victorious or return dead. There's no third option. Your actual shield is enormous, about 3 feet in diameter, made of wood with a bronze facing weighing around 16 pounds. It's designed to protect not just you, but part of the man to your left when you're in formation. Drop your shield to run away, and you leave your comrade exposed. This is why losing your shield is the ultimate disgrace. It proves you valued your life above your duty to your brothers in arms. Life isn't all brutal training, though. There are occasional festivals and religious ceremonies, but even these are military in nature. The dances you perform are war dances. The songs you sing are about famous battles or fallen heroes. Even your prayers to the gods focus mainly on asking for strength in battle and victory for Sparta. As a young warrior, you also get your first taste of real political power. All Spartan citizens can attend the assembly and vote on matters of state. But don't get too excited about this democracy. The assembly can only vote yes or no on proposals put forward by the kings and elders, and voting is done by shouting. The side that shouts loudest wins. It's less careful deliberation of complex issues, and more who can make the most noise. One especially charming political tradition is the annual declaration of war against the Helots, Sparta's slave population, who outnumber actual Spartans by about 10 to 1. Yes, every year Sparta formally declares war on its own slaves, making any killing of helots not just legal but patriotic. As a young warrior, you might be selected for the Crypteia, a secret police force that terrorizes the helot population, killing anyone who seems too strong or rebellious. It's essentially state-sanctioned murder, designed to keep the slaves in line through fear. The constant war footing isn't just about external enemies or keeping slaves in check. It's also because fighting is literally the only skill you have. Spartans were forbidden from learning trades, engaging in commerce, or practicing crafts. Money-making was considered beneath a citizen. Your job is war, period. This sounds impressive until you realize it means Sparta had no artists, no philosophers, no innovators, no architects. All the magnificent temples, sculptures, plays, and philosophical works that we associate with ancient Greece, none of them came from Sparta. The society that prided itself on producing the perfect human specimens actually contributed almost nothing to human culture or knowledge. But you don't have time to ponder these philosophical questions about your society's lack of cultural achievements. You're too busy preparing for the next battle, the next war, the next test of your warrior skills. That's all that matters in Sparta, being ready when the call to arms comes, and it will come. Sparta was almost constantly at war with someone. Other Greek city-states, Persians, rebellious helots, you name it. Peace was just the annoying interval between opportunities for glory. As a young warrior, you're eager for your chance to prove yourself in real combat, not just training exercises. So there you have it. Life as a young Spartan warrior. You belong to the state, live with your comrades rather than your family, eat terrible food, train constantly, and wait for your chance to die gloriously in battle. Your personal desires, interests, and comfort mean nothing. Your value is measured solely by your usefulness as a weapon of Sparta. And the truly scary part, this is actually as good as it gets, because what awaits you next is the reality of ancient warfare, a horrific, bloody mess that has nothing in common with the sanitized versions you see in movies. But that's a story for later. For now, just remember that while other young men across the ancient world were falling in love, learning trades, creating art, or exploring ideas, you're spending the prime of your life marching in formation and eating pig's blood soup with the same group of guys you've been stuck with since you were 7. Living the dream Spartan style. So you've survived birth selection, the agauge, and the joys of young adulthood in Sparta. By now, you're probably thinking, hey, this isn't so bad. I'm tough, I'm trained, I'm ready for anything. Well, buckle up, warrior, because now comes the part where people actively try to kill you. Welcome to War Spartan Style, where you finally get to put all that brutal training to use. The good news? You have a chance at eternal glory. The bad news? You have to survive dozens of brutal battles first, and the odds aren't exactly in your favour. Let's start with your pre-battle routine. While soldiers from other armies might spend their last peaceful moments praying, making sacrifices to the gods, or having existential crises about their mortality, Spartan warriors have a different approach. You carefully groom yourself. Yes, in Sparta, looking good is part of battle preparation. You oil your body and comb your long hair until it shines. This isn't vanity, it's tradition. Spartans believe that a warrior should look his best when facing death. It's basically the ancient equivalent of dressing up for your own funeral, except you're hoping it's just a dress rehearsal. Your battle equipment hasn't changed much over the centuries. You wear a red tunic, not because it looks intimidating, though it does, but because it hides bloodstains. Practical fashion, Spartan style. Your armour consists of a bronze breastplate or cuirass, bronze greaves to protect your shins, and a bronze helmet that covers most of your face, leaving just enough visibility to see who you're about to stab. Your primary weapon is the dory, a spear about 7 to 9 feet long, with a leaf-shaped iron spearhead at one end and a bronze butt spike at the other. This spike isn't just decorative. If your spear breaks, you can flip it and keep fighting. The Spartans were nothing if not efficient with their killing tools. Your most important piece of equipment, though, is your shield, the aspis, sometimes called a hoplon. It's large, round, and heavy, covering you from chin to knee. The shield isn't just for your protection, it's for the protection of the entire phalanx. When you stand in formation, your shield covers half of your body and half of the man to your left. This is why dropping your shield is the ultimate disgrace in Sparta. You're not just endangering yourself, you're endangering your brothers in arms. Before battle, you and your comrades eat a hearty meal, if you can call black broth hearty. This disgusting pig's blood soup is your power meal before combat. The thinking was that it's better to fight on a full stomach, even if that stomach is filled with something that would make most people vomit. Other Greeks claimed Spartans ate this revolting brew to prepare themselves for death. When your daily meals are this bad, charging into enemy spears starts looking appealing. As you march to battle, you're not quiet and solemn like other armies. Sparta doesn't do solemn marches. Instead, pipers play music, and the entire army moves in perfect step. This isn't just for show. Moving in rhythm helps maintain formation and intimidates the enemy. There's something deeply unnerving about seeing thousands of men moving as one, like a single organism with spears. Spartan battle tactics aren't particularly complex or varied. You don't need fancy maneuvers when you have the most disciplined infantry in the ancient world. Your basic tactic is the phalanx, a tightly packed formation of overlapping shields with spears pointing forward. It's essentially a human tank, a moving wall of bronze and iron designed to crush anything in its path. When the battle begins, you don't rush forward screaming like warriors in movies. Spartans advance in silence, in perfect order, at a steady pace. While other Greeks might charge with wild battle cries, you and your comrades march calmly toward the enemy, red cloaks flowing, spears levelled, shields locked. The psychological effect on your opponents is devastating. Many enemies break formation and run before the first blow is struck. Now let's be clear about something. Ancient battle was nothing like what you see in movies. There were no elegant duels, no spinning moves, no jumping attacks. It was a brutal pushing match with sharp objects. Two phalanxes would crash into each other like massive football scrimmages, except everyone has spears and swords instead of footballs. The front line, where you're stationed as an experienced warrior, stabs with spears while pushing forward with shields. The noise is deafening. Thousands of men shouting, metal clanging against metal, the screams of the wounded and dying. The smell is even worse. Blood, sweat, urine and feces as fear makes men lose control of their bodily functions. If your spear breaks, you draw your zephos, a short sword designed for stabbing in close quarters. This is where the real horror begins. In the crush of bodies, you can barely move your arms. You stab upward, under the enemy's shield if possible, aiming for the throat, armpit or groin, any unprotected area. It's not glorious. It's not heroic. It's brutal, desperate, and terrifying. But you don't show fear. You were trained from age 7 for this moment. While other men might panic, flee, or freeze, you remain steady. This is the true value of Spartan training. Not superior fighting techniques, but superior mental discipline under extreme stress. The battle might last hours, with the front lines periodically rotating to give exhausted fighters a brief rest. There's no time-out, no half-time show. The fighting continues until one side breaks and runs. And here's where being a Spartan gets especially dangerous. You're expected to pursue and kill fleeing enemies. While other Greek armies might be content with winning the field, Spartans are taught to annihilate their opponents completely. If you're wounded, don't expect a medical evacuation or field hospital with anesthesia. Field medicine in ancient Greece consisted primarily of try not to die. If you can still walk, you keep fighting. If you can't, you lie where you fell until the battle ends. If your side wins, your comrades might carry you back to camp where a field surgeon will do his best with wine for disinfectant and a sharp knife for surgical tools. If your side loses, well, hope the enemy believes in giving honourable burials. The worst wounds aren't always the fatal ones. A spear through the gut might kill you quickly, but a damaged limb that becomes infected could mean days or weeks of agony before death. And if you survive with a significant disability, you're no longer useful as a warrior, which means you're no longer a valuable citizen. There are no veterans' benefits in Sparta, no honourable retirement for the wounded. Your choices are to find some way to still be useful to the state, or live with the shame of being seen as a burden. Between major battles, you're not sitting around playing ancient Greek board games. Sparta maintains its fighting edge through constant smaller conflicts, border skirmishes, and putting down helot rebellions. There's always another fight, another chance to prove your worth or meet your end. And let's not forget the psychological toll. Modern soldiers develop PTSD after a single deployment. You're fighting continuously for decades, seeing friends die horrible deaths, killing men face to face, experiencing the full sensory nightmare of ancient combat over and over again. Sparta has no therapists, no concept of trauma or psychological wounds. Your options for dealing with the horror are simple: endure it or die. The most famous Spartan battle, of course, is Thermopylae, the stand of the 300 against the Persian army. But here's what popular culture gets wrong. Those 300 Spartans knew they were going to die. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to buy time for the rest of Greece to prepare. King Leonidas chose men who already had sons, ensuring their family lines would continue. It wasn't just a suicide mission. It was a calculated sacrifice. If you somehow survive decades of this, battle after battle, wound after wound, you reach an age where your body simply can't perform at the level required for frontline combat. This doesn't mean retirement to a peaceful life of storytelling by the fire. It means you get assigned to train younger warriors, lead from the rear, or serve on councils. There's no out from service to Sparta until you physically cannot serve anymore. Death in battle, by the way, is considered the ultimate achievement in Spartan culture. Die fighting for Sparta, and you get something almost no other Spartan gets: your name on your tombstone. Most Spartans were buried in unmarked graves. Only women who died in childbirth and men who died in battle were deemed worthy of name memorials. Everyone else was simply forgotten. That's why the famous Spartan mother's farewell, "Come back with your shielder on it," isn't just tough talk. It's a cultural value so deeply ingrained that mothers genuinely preferred their sons dead than dishonoured. When you're raised in a society where your own mother would rather see you carried home as a corpse than see you survive as a coward, running away isn't even considered an option. So there you have it. War, Spartan style. No glory, no heroic speeches, no dramatic duels. Just brutal, bloody combat where survival often feels like a temporary condition. You fight, you bleed, your comrades die, and you do it all again next season like some macabre sporting schedule. The truly incredible thing is that men endured this for their entire adult lives. From their first battle as young warriors until they were too old to lift a shield, Spartan men knew nothing but war and preparation for war. They lived with constant pain from old wounds, nightmares from battles past, and the certainty that their next engagement could be their last. So the next time you see a movie portraying ancient battle as exciting and glorious, remember the reality, the terror, the stench, the screams, the sight of your childhood friends disemboweled before your eyes. Remember that for all their fearsome reputation, Spartans were still human beings thrust into inhuman circumstances, trained from childhood to endure what no person should have to experience. And if, by some miracle, you survive to old age in Sparta, well, that's a whole different challenge. Because in a society that values nothing but military prowess, what happens when your fighting days are behind you? But that's a story for later. For now, clean your shield, sharpen your spear, and prepare for another day of war, the only life a Spartan knows. Against all odds, you've survived. You made it through the brutal inspection as a newborn, endured the Agog's daily tortures, served decades as a warrior, fought in countless battles, and somehow avoided death by enemy weapons, disease, or training accidents. Congratulations, you're now an old Spartan warrior, a rare breed indeed. While reaching old age in any ancient society was an achievement, in Sparta it was practically a miracle. Most of your childhood companions are long dead, left on mountainsides as infants, beaten to death in training or killed in battle. You're one of the few who live to see your hair turn grey. But don't expect a comfortable retirement with a pension and a beach house. This is Sparta, where even old age comes with responsibilities, pain, and yes, more black broth soup. Let's start with the good news. If you've reached the age of 60, you're eligible for election to the Gerousia, the council of elders that serves as Sparta's Senate. This body of 28 elders plus the 2 kings holds tremendous power in Spartan society. They propose laws to the assembly, serve as the Supreme Court in criminal cases, and can even overrule the kings in some matters. After a lifetime of taking orders and following the commands of others, you finally get to be part of the group that makes the rules. Election to the Gerousia is for life, which sounds impressive until you remember that life for a 60-year-old man in ancient Greece likely meant another 5 to 10 years at most. And the competition is fierce. Only the most respected warriors with the most impressive records get chosen. If you made it to old age but were just average in battle, you're not getting that seat at the table. Even if you don't make it to the Gerousia, being an older Spartan citizen still grants you certain privileges. You're finally excused from military service, though you might be called upon to train young warriors or serve in advisory roles during conflicts. You no longer have to live in the barracks, which means you can actually live with your wife full-time, assuming she hasn't forgotten what you look like after decades of brief nighttime visits. But old age in Sparta isn't some peaceful golden period. Your body, which has endured extreme physical stress since childhood, is now falling apart in spectacular fashion. Those childhood beatings, they've left permanent scars and joint damage. That spear wound from the Battle of Mantinea 30 years ago, it aches constantly and never healed properly. The broken bones, dislocated shoulders, and concussions from decades of training, they've all come back to haunt you in the form of chronic pain and limited mobility. Modern athletes who train intensively for a decade often suffer lifelong physical consequences. You've been training and fighting at maximum intensity for over 50 years. Your spine is compressed, your joints are worn down to bone on bone, and simple movements that you once performed effortlessly now cause shooting pain. There are no pain medications beyond wine, no physical therapy beyond walk it off, and no disability accommodations beyond try not to look weak in public. Your diet hasn't improved much either. You're still expected to attend your syssitia, the dining mess that you've eaten at since you were 20. The food is still terrible, the benches are still hard, and now your aging digestive system has even more trouble handling that infamous black broth. But showing up remains mandatory if you want to maintain your citizen status. Miss too many meals, and even in your old age you could face demotion from the ranks of the equals. Dementia or other cognitive decline would be especially devastating in a culture that prizes mental sharpness and decision-making ability. A Spartan elder showing signs of mental confusion might quickly lose his position of respect and authority. There's no concept of elder care or assisted living. If you can't function independently, you become a burden on your family or the state, the very thing you've been trained your entire life to avoid being. Death, when it finally comes, might be seen as a relief from the physical suffering of old age. But even in death, Spartan austerity rules. Unless you died in battle during your warrior years, your grave will be simple and unadorned. No elaborate tombstones, no lengthy epitaphs listing your achievements. Just a plain marker with your name, if you're lucky. Spartans believed excessive displays, even in death, promoted vanity and individualism, qualities they despised. The true tragedy of reaching old age in Sparta isn't just the physical pain or the simple burial. It's seeing the results of the system you devoted your life to. By the late 5th century BCE, Sparta was already in decline. Their obsessive focus on military training at the expense of everything else left them unable to adapt to changing warfare tactics. Their refusal to allow immigration or to naturalize foreigners meant their citizen population steadily declined. Their harsh treatment of helots led to constant rebellions that drained resources and manpower. As an old Spartan, you might live long enough to see your society's flaws exposed. You might witness the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BCE, where Thebes shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility. You might see the number of full Spartan citizens dwindle from thousands to mere hundreds as fewer and fewer men survived the increasingly harsh standards. You might realize that the system you suffered for, killed for, and sacrificed everything for was fundamentally unsustainable. But would you say anything about it? Probably not. By the time you reach old age in Sparta, you've spent 6 decades having independent thought beaten, starved, and trained out of you. You've been taught that the Spartan way is the only way, that questioning tradition is weakness, that change is decay. Even as you watch your society crumble around you, you're more likely to blame insufficient adherence to tradition than the traditions themselves. So there you have it. Old age in Sparta. Your body's broken, your mind is indoctrinated, your family relationships are strained, and your society is rigidly following a path to its own destruction. Your reward for surviving the Spartan system is getting to enforce that system on others, perpetuating the cycle of brutality that shaped you. The final irony: despite their legendary toughness and military prowess, the Spartans left almost nothing of lasting value to civilization. No great buildings like the Parthenon, no revolutionary philosophical ideas like those from Athens, no scientific discoveries, no literary masterpieces, just stories of their brutality, their discipline, and their eventual decline. You dreamed of glory, fame, and immortality. You got starvation, bruises, and a lifetime of blood, sweat, and black broth. Welcome to life as a Spartan. From your first breath as a newborn being inspected for defects, to your last breath as an elder watching your society fade, survival was never about thriving. It was just about enduring one more day in the most feared and feared society of the ancient world. In the end, perhaps the most remarkable thing about Sparta isn't that they created such fearsome warriors, it's that anyone would choose to live that way at all. But then again, in Sparta, choice was never really part of the equation. You lived as Sparta demanded, or you didn't live at all. Tonight on Digging into History, we journey through inventions that forever changed our world. From Edison's light bulb illuminating the darkness, to the Wright brothers conquering the skies, from the birth of the internet connecting billions, to Ford's assembly line transforming production, and finally to the personal computer revolutionizing our daily lives. Each invention didn't just solve a problem, it fundamentally reshaped human civilization. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to travel through time as we explore how these revolutionary technologies created the modern world we live in today. In the dimming light of a late autumn afternoon in 1879, a small workshop in Menlo Park, New Jersey, glowed with a light that would soon change the world. Inside, Thomas Edison and his team of dedicated researchers watched with exhausted but triumphant eyes as a small glass bulb continued to emit a steady warm glow. For over 13 hours, this delicate creation had been burning, defying the short-lived attempts that had come before it. This was not the first electric light ever created, but it marked the moment when electric lighting became practical, affordable, and ready to transform human civilization. The light that burned in that workshop would soon spread across the globe, forever altering the rhythm of human life. The story of electric light began long before Edison's breakthrough. Humans had been seeking ways to push back the darkness since the earliest days of civilization. For thousands of years, fire was our only tool against the night, first as simple campfires, then as oil lamps, candles and gas lights. Each improvement brought better illumination, but all shared the same drawbacks. They produced smoke, created fire hazards, consumed oxygen, and provided uneven, flickering light. The dream of a clean, safe, steady source of artificial light tantalized inventors and scientists throughout the early 19th century. By the 1870s, the race to create practical electric lighting was heating up. Scientists and inventors around the world understood the basic principle that electricity flowing through a resistant material would cause it to heat up and glow. The challenge was finding a material that would glow brightly without quickly burning up or melting. Many brilliant minds had tried and failed to solve this puzzle. British inventor Joseph Swan had made significant progress with carbon filaments. In Russia, Alexander Lodygin had experimented with carbon rods in vacuum tubes. In Canada, Henry Woodward and Matthew Evans had patented an electric lamp. The pieces of the solution were scattered across continents, waiting for someone to bring them together. Enter Thomas Edison, already famous for his phonograph and improvements to the telegraph. Edison was not merely an inventor, but a master of the innovation process itself. While others worked alone or in small groups, Edison created what many consider the first modern research and development laboratory. His facility at Menlo Park brought together dozens of skilled workers, craftsmen, engineers, mathematicians, and scientists, all focused on solving problems through methodical experimentation. Edison understood that invention was not just about brilliant ideas, but about the patient, persistent work of testing, refining, and improving. Edison and his team began their light bulb work in earnest in 1878, after Edison had visited William Wallace's lighting system demonstration in Connecticut. Edison was convinced he could improve upon existing designs to create a practical, economical electric light that could replace gas lighting in homes and businesses. With his typical confidence, he announced to the press that he would solve the electric light problem, a declaration that attracted both investors and skeptics. The team at Menlo Park faced a daunting challenge. They needed to create a bulb with a filament that would glow brightly for hundreds of hours without breaking down, all while keeping electricity consumption economical. This wasn't just about the bulb itself. Edison understood that he needed to create an entire system of electrical generation and distribution to make his invention practical. Edison's team tested thousands of materials for filaments, different metals, carbonized threads, plant fibers, and more. Each material was shaped into thin filaments, placed in glass bulbs from which the air was removed to create a vacuum, and then tested to see how long it would glow before burning out. Early attempts lasted only minutes or hours. The workshop filled with the acrid smell of burned materials and the disappointed sighs of tired researchers as filament after filament failed. The breakthrough began to take shape when they turned to carbonized materials. By October 1879, they had created a bulb with a carbonized cotton thread that burned for over 13 hours. Within months, they improved this to a carbonized bamboo filament that could last over 1,200 hours. This was the practical electric light bulb the world had been waiting for, long-lasting enough to be commercially viable. But Edison knew that a single bulb was not enough. For electric lighting to replace gas lighting, he needed to create an entire system. While perfecting the bulb, Edison and his team were simultaneously developing everything needed for a complete electrical distribution network: generators, wiring systems, electrical meters, safety fuses, on-off switches, and more. By 1882, Edison had opened the Pearl Street Station in New York City, America's first central power plant, initially serving 59 customers in Lower Manhattan with 800 light bulbs. The impact of practical electric lighting spread rapidly across the world's cities. By the late 1880s, electric streetlights began replacing gas lamps in major city centres. The warm glow of electric bulbs began to appear in upscale homes, theatres, department stores, and factories. For the first time in human history, interior spaces could be brightly and safely illuminated without fire. This transformation went far beyond simple convenience. electric lighting fundamentally changed human relationships with day and night. Throughout history, most people's activities had been governed by the rising and setting of the sun. Work largely stopped when darkness fell, except for essential tasks performed by candlelight or gas lamp. With electric lighting, factories could operate around the clock with multiple shifts of workers. Stores could stay open into the evening. People could read, write, and socialize long after sunset. The social impact was profound. Streets became safer at night as electric streetlights pushed back shadows where criminals once hid. Nightlife flourished as restaurants, theatres, and entertainment venues took advantage of reliable lighting. Education expanded as people gained more hours to read and study. The productivity of industries soared as work could continue regardless of the season or time of day. In homes, electric light brought dramatic changes to daily life. Families could gather in the evening in well-lit rooms rather than clustering around a single lamp or candle. Reading became easier and more widespread, boosting literacy. Homes became cleaner as the soot and smoke from gas lamps and candles disappeared. Fire risk decreased significantly, saving countless lives and properties that might otherwise have been lost to flames. For women, whose domestic work had often extended into the dimly lit evening hours, electric light brought relief from eye strain and the ability to complete tasks more quickly and safely. Children could study in the evening without damaging their vision. The elderly, whose aging eyes struggled with dim lighting, gained new independence. The spread of electric lighting was not instantaneous or universal. Initially, electric light was a luxury for the wealthy and for businesses that could justify the expense through increased productivity. Rural areas lagged far behind cities in electrification. In the United States, while major cities had widespread electric service by 1900, many rural communities would wait until the 1930s and the Rural Electrification Act before receiving power. This uneven distribution created new social divides between the electrified and the non-electrified. Access to electric lighting became a symbol of progress and modernity, while those still using candles or oil lamps were increasingly seen as living in the past. Governments and utilities faced growing pressure to expand electrical networks to serve more communities. Meanwhile, the technology of electric lighting continued to evolve. Edison's carbon filament bulbs gave way to more efficient designs. In 1904, European inventors introduced tungsten filament bulbs that burned brighter and lasted longer. In the 1920s, bulbs began to be filled with inert gases rather than vacuums, further improving performance. Fluorescent lighting, developed in the 1930s, offered greater efficiency for commercial spaces. Each improvement made electric lighting more affordable and accessible to more people. The industry that grew around electric lighting created millions of jobs worldwide, from the miners who extracted copper for wiring and power plant workers, to electricians who installed home systems and factory workers who manufactured bulbs, lamps, and fixtures. Electricity became one of the foundations of modern economic growth. Electric lighting also sparked broader electrical revolutions. Once homes and businesses were wired for lighting, they quickly began adding other electrical devices. The same wires that powered light bulbs could power fans, heaters, kitchen appliances, and eventually radios, televisions, and computers. Electric lighting was the pioneering technology that opened the door to complete electrification of daily life. Public health improved dramatically with electric lighting. Hospitals could perform surgeries at any hour with perfect illumination. Food production became safer as processing facilities replaced dim, smoky environments with clean, bright workspaces. Water purification plants used electricity to treat drinking water. Even home hygiene improved as people could better see dust, dirt, and pests that might have lurked in shadowy corners. The environmental impact was complex. While electric lights eliminated the local pollution of gas lamps and candles, the power plants that generated electricity created new forms of pollution, particularly as coal became the dominant fuel for electricity generation. This trade-off, cleaner local environments versus centralized pollution sources, would become a pattern repeated throughout the electrical age. The cultural impact of electric lighting found expression in art, literature, and entertainment. Painters explored the new qualities of artificial light. Nighttime entertainment flourished. Photography advanced as electric lighting allowed for indoor picture taking without the dangerous flash powders previously used. Cinema became possible as electric lights provided both illumination for filming and power for projectors. New forms of advertising emerged as electric signs and billboards captured attention after dark. Perhaps most profoundly, electric lighting changed human perceptions of darkness itself. Throughout history, night had been a time of mystery, danger, and supernatural fear. Cultural traditions around the world included countless stories of night creatures, spirits, and perils that lurked in darkness. As electric lights pushed back the shadows, some of this mystique faded. Night became less a separate realm and more simply a darker version of day, a space that could be controlled, navigated, and utilized. Sleep patterns changed as people stayed awake longer. Before electric lighting, most people slept in patterns closely aligned with sunset and sunrise, often including a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night. With artificial lighting, the single 8-hour sleep pattern became the norm, and staying up late became common. This shift aligned with industrial work schedules but created new forms of sleep deprivation and disruption unknown to previous generations. Edison himself could not have foreseen all these consequences when he and his team watched their successful bulb glow in 1879. What began as a quest to create a better light source spiraled outward to touch virtually every aspect of human society. The light bulb became more than an invention. It became a universal symbol of innovation itself. Even today, a glowing light bulb represents the moment of inspiration, the birth of a new idea. By the early 20th century, electric lights had transformed the visual appearance of the human world. City skylines glowed at night. Theaters were outlined in thousands of bulbs. Department store windows shone with displays visible day and night. Homes glowed warmly through windows that once would have been dark. From space, the spread of electric lighting would eventually become visible as webs of light tracing human habitation across the dark side of the planet. Communication networks expanded alongside electric lighting. Telegraph and telephone systems, which often shared poles with electrical lines, connected illuminated spaces across vast distances. News traveled faster. Business could be conducted across time zones. A globally connected world began to emerge, with electricity as its foundation. As the electrical grid expanded to power lighting, it created the infrastructure for the next waves of technological revolution. The same power lines that fed electric bulbs would eventually connect computers, enable the internet, and power the digital age. In this way, Edison's practical light bulbs set the stage for innovations he could never have imagined. Yet for all its world-changing impact, the light bulb began with a simple human need to extend the day beyond sunset, to push back darkness, to see more clearly. The same drive that had led our ancestors to capture fire now led to capturing electricity, transforming it from a frightening natural phenomenon into a controlled tool for human progress. As electric lighting spread across continents in the early 20th century, another technological revolution was taking shape, one that would further shrink distances and transform human mobility. While electric bulbs were changing how we experience night and day, a different invention was about to change our relationship with the Earth itself, freeing humans from the surface for the first time in our history and launching us into the age of flight. The world that Edison's light bulbs illuminated was about to become more connected than ever before, as a pair of bicycle mechanics from Ohio prepared to leave the ground behind and soar into the open sky. On a cold December morning in 1903, the wind swept across the sandy dunes of Kill Devil Hills near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and the breeze steady at around 20 miles per hour. Two brothers from Ohio stood beside a strange contraption made of wood, cloth, and wire. They had come to this remote spot for its reliable winds and soft landing surfaces of sand. For years they had been pursuing what many considered an impossible dream, controlled, powered flight in a machine heavier than air. That morning, as local lifesavers and a curious onlooker watched, Orville Wright lay down on the lower wing of their flying machine, while his brother Wilbur stood nearby. At 10:35 a.m., after the engine was started and warmed up, the fragile craft began moving along a wooden rail. And then, for 12 magical seconds, it lifted from the earth. Humanity had entered the age of flight. The Wright brothers' achievement that day was both humble and monumental. Their first flight covered just 120 feet, less than the wingspan of a modern passenger jet. The aircraft stayed aloft for only 12 seconds, yet this brief journey represented the crossing of a threshold that humans had dreamed about for thousands of years. Since ancient times, people had watched birds with envy and wonder, creating myths about flight and designing countless failed machines in attempts to join them in the sky. Now at last, humans had found a way to break free from the Earth. The path to this moment had been long and filled with both triumph and tragedy. Throughout history, dreamers and inventors had been captivated by the possibility of flight. Ancient Chinese had flown kites, understanding principles of aerodynamics without achieving human flight. Leonardo da Vinci had sketched detailed designs for flying machines in the 15th century, including versions of helicopters and gliders, but lacked engines powerful and light enough to make them work. In the late 18th century, the Montgolfier brothers had achieved the first human flight in hot air balloons, allowing people to rise vertically, but with little control over horizontal movement. In the 19th century, experimenters began making real progress toward powered flight. Sir George Cayley in England identified the four forces of flight: weight, lift, drag, and thrust, and designed gliders that successfully carried people short distances. Otto Lilienthal in Germany made over 2,000 glider flights, gathering crucial data about wing surfaces and control before dying in a glider crash in 1896. Samuel Langley, head of the Smithsonian Institution, built large models that flew successfully but failed spectacularly when he attempted full-scale piloted flights just days before the Wright brothers succeeded. What set the Wright brothers apart was their methodical approach to solving the three essential problems of flight: lift to get the machine off the ground, propulsion to move it forward, and control to steer it. While others focused primarily on powerful engines or wing designs, the Wrights recognized that control was the most fundamental challenge. A flying machine without control would be useless and dangerous. They were also uniquely positioned by their background. They were bicycle manufacturers who understood mechanics, balance, and the importance of light, strong structures. Wilbur and Orville Wright grew up in a household that encouraged curiosity and practical problem-solving. Their father, a bishop in the Church of the United Brethren in Christ, kept a library full of books on diverse subjects. Their mother, who had attended college, unusual for women of her era, was mechanically skilled and created toys and household devices.